For the past month, we have all been waiting patiently for that frost risk to disappear so that we could start our spring gardens, which is pretty unusual for us here in Florida. A lot of us in Central and South Florida would have already planted our warm season crops out in the garden, but we really had to dodge that frost risk this year. Earlier this week, I'm filming this on Thursday, February 27th, and earlier this week we had another cold snap. But it finally seems like when I look at the weather, we might be out of the woods and it's time to get those spring gardens going. Today, I'm going to talk through all the vegetables, herbs, and flowers that we should be planting throughout the whole state of Florida in the month of March. I'll talk through some nuances as we go that might be applicable to North Florida or South Florida. But I know we've all been waiting for about a month for this day, so let's get going and let's get planting. Let's start by talking about tomatoes. In March, North Florida can definitely still transplant their tomatoes in, and Central Florida, we're normally doing it in like January or February, but because of this frost, I'm gonna say go ahead and transplant your tomatoes in the garden this month, because honestly, that's what I'm doing. I lost my tomato plants unexpectedly in that freeze, and I didn't have any seeds started, so I ended up starting seeds right after that freeze in the beginning of February, and here they are. It's a sun gold tomato, and this is about a month-old transplant. I haven't even thinned them yet. I should probably go ahead and do that right now. And this is an indeterminate variety for me. My thought for tomatoes this year was to put an indeterminate type on an arched trellis somewhere in the garden like this one. An indeterminate tomato variety is one that vines and really creates a lot of length and a lot of tomatoes, but you have to be able to support it. In the past, I've tried doing it on the back side of this raised bed where I have a panel trellis. And it's just been kind of annoying for me because half the plant is on the other side in my neighbor's yard. And so I'm going to go with an arch trellis this time and see if I can keep it on my side of the fence and keep the harvest for me. You can also choose a determinate variety tomato if you'd like, and that would grow more like a bush style and could be supported by a tomato cage. Generally, the yields are higher on an indeterminate tomato, which makes sense. It's a bigger plant. If you're brand new to gardening, when I say transplant your tomatoes, what I'm talking about is taking a starter plant, not a seed. So we're coming up on the last chance to plant tomatoes here in Florida for spring, and so your best bet is to have a starter plant. For us seasoned gardeners, we may have a start already ready to go like I do right here, and I would just transplant this one after I spend a little bit of time hardening it off in the sun. Another option would be going to your local nursery or your local big box store and picking up a starter plant. Make sure you're picky about which type of tomato you choose, whether it's indeterminate or tomato, indeterminate or determinate, and whether you want a slicing tomato variety or if you want a cherry tomato variety. Personally, I don't tend to eat the slicing style very much, so I'm going to go for a cherry tomato. The next crop is peppers. Peppers are similar to tomatoes in the sense that they're warm season crops, they're frost sensitive, and they're transplantable. I lost all of my peppers in the frost event about a month ago as well, so I started some seeds. So I know I'm a little bit late to the curve, but North and Central Florida, you guys can transplant peppers this month. At this point, if you don't have any starts going, you can do a store-bought transplant and it would work out just fine. When it comes to choosing which variety of pepper you want to grow in your garden, I would highly recommend at this point in the season choosing a hot pepper or a banana pepper or an Anaheim pepper. Bell peppers, to me, they just are barely worth it. The yields off the plant are just not that great, and then it seems like once the temperatures warm up, the taste of the pepper isn't really that great either. So I'm going with a habanero pepper, a Thai hot pepper. I think I have my favorite Megatron jalapeno going again. And last season I did a banana pepper and an Anaheim pepper, and those were my two most highly productive plants I've ever grown at all. I am not doing those this season though, because I still have a freezer full of chopped Anaheim and banana peppers. This season I'm hoping we can make some hot sauce. I've got a bunch of Tabasco peppers in the freezer too that I saved from my last year garden, and I want to add some habaneros and some Thai hot and make some unique hot sauces. Peppers are also going to need some support. In the past, I've used a bamboo stake to support it, and it works pretty well. This year, I went with this square cage. It's actually a tomato cage, but I think that it'll be pretty nice for a pepper. And my plan is to fertilize a lot and try to get these peppers to be really big and really productive. This one, I know you can hardly see it because I bought it and it was dark green and I spray painted it black because I'm trying to make the garden look a little more cohesive and blend into the back fence. And I think it almost blends in too much for the camera and you guys can't even see it. But I also love the idea of having a cage like this because it gives me so many more spots along the edge if I wanted to do like a vining flower, like a black-eyed Susan, or like a trailing nasturtium and maybe make it climb up a little bit. That would be really cool on something like this. When you're looking for a spot to put a pepper in your garden, keep in mind that these actually do well with a little bit of dappled shade or dappled sunlight. You can put them underneath an arch trellis, or you can put them underneath a bean teepee like I have over here, and it'll almost shield them from some sun scald. I've gotten sun scald on my banana peppers before, and I think they'd be grateful for a little bit of dappled shade from a bean teepee or an arch trellis with cucumbers above them. While we're talking about warm season transplantable crops, we should talk about eggplants because they're treated the exact same way. You can buy a transplant of a Black Beauty eggplant from the store, or if you started some eggplants from seed, you can go ahead and transplant them this month, especially if you're in North and Central Florida. South Florida, you're kind of out of the window. But I realize that this year everything has just been up in the air as far as the garden because of all these frost events that were totally unexpected. So if you need to plant something late, it's okay. It's your garden. 2 seasons ago, I grew an eggplant and really had a lot of production out of a Black Beauty eggplant. So I chose the same variety this year, and I'm gonna do something similar to what I'm doing with the peppers and put it underneath one of the trellises, probably underneath one of the bean teepees, because I noticed in the past that my eggplants definitely had some sun scald once we got into like May timeframe and they were producing. So keep that in mind. You may want to put it in an area that has plenty of sun, but also has the opportunity for a little bit of dappled shade to come in. Now we get to talk about my favorite crop, and that is a cucumber. This year I'm growing a Monica cucumber, but in the past I've had really great luck with a Boston pickling cucumber and semi-good luck with a China Jade cucumber. This one is a dual purpose cucumber, meaning it could be used for pickling or slicing, whereas a Boston pickling variety is really intended for pickling and a China Jade is better for slicing. So this year I went with one variety to solve both needs, and I planted them along this arch trellis right here, and you can see they germinated really nicely. I'm about ready to thin them down to 1 per spot, and I can't wait to have a cucumber trellis going right here. During the germination phase, I want to mention that I had these little plastic cups sitting right on top of the seed. And that's mostly because I have squirrels or rats or bunnies or who knows what that comes and digs and eats those seeds as soon as I sow them in the garden. So I put this on top and it was a great little protection before the seeds came up. I actually punched a little hole right here too so it would get a little airflow and not be too humid in there. And I think that this served a nice dual purpose of protecting against the really cold weather that we just had a couple days ago. Cucumbers have a pretty small planting window here, so South Florida, I think you're pretty much out of it already. You really should have planted them last month or the month prior, although I know the frost really screwed us all up. In the past, I've had better success with cucumbers than I have with squash, but I still would say it's one of the most challenging crops here in Florida. You've got to be on top of it whenever you see some pickle worms and spray some BT. And you've also got to be on top of it when you see any powdery mildew and downy mildew and spray with a hydrogen peroxide and water mixture or some other type of organic spray that's meant for powdery mildew treatment. In the cucurbit family, we also have squash. Squash includes summer squash and winter squash. I was talking to my husband about this the other day and he was like, how can you plant both winter squash and summer squash right now? And I kind of chuckled, and it reminded me to explain what summer and winter squash actually means. It's not in relation to the seasons of planting. It's in relation to the thickness of the skin. So summer squash is a much thinner skin. Think of like zucchini or that yellow squash. And normally those don't store very well, and so they're used fresh normally. Whereas winter squash has that thick outer skin like an acorn squash or butternut squash or a spaghetti squash. And it's called a winter squash because it's a thick enough skin to let that squash store throughout the entire winter. This year I have planted, I think this arch right here in the front, in the foreground, is I think butternut squash, and the one in the background over there is acorn squash, or maybe I have it backwards. I chose to do 2 plants on each trellis, so they're right on the edge and they should be spaced out nicely to get a nice good airflow. When it comes to summer squash, I can't believe it took me this long, but I finally put it together that summer squash in general has a bush-like growing habit, and it is generally not great for a climbing trellis like this. Winter squash is the one that has the vine and will climb appropriately on an arch trellis like this. March is a great time for North and Central Florida to plant our cantaloupe and watermelon. I planted several of them in this tree ring right here, intermixed with some flowers. And I've done that before in the summer last year with Seminole pumpkin, and it turned out looking really pretty. I just wrapped the vines around the whole tree ring, and I got a lot of pumpkins that way, and I'm hoping I get a lot of watermelon and cantaloupes too. The cantaloupe variety I chose was Hale's Best Jumbo from Botanical Interests, and I did a sugar baby watermelon as well. So I'm going to grow my cantaloupe and watermelon right in here. They haven't germinated yet. Maybe since the weather's warming up, they'll pop up here shortly. Next we have beans. Beans include bush beans, pole beans, lima beans. This year I'm growing mine on a TP trellis. What I love about this homemade TP trellis is how cheap it is. These 8-foot bamboo stakes right here, I picked them up from Rockledge Gardens, $3 a piece, and I think I crammed in like 7 bamboo stakes right here and tied them together at the top. And so that's like a $21 trellis, and the beans will just wrap around that bamboo stake and climb all the way to the top. And I actually chose an Orient Wonder long bean, so they're going to give me really long 18 to 30 inch long beans right here. All of us here in Florida, North, Central, and South Florida, can plant pole beans, bush beans, and lima beans this month. Mine are already starting to sprout up. I'm really excited about it. We can also grow corn this month all across the whole state of Florida. Just direct sow the seeds into the garden or into the ground, and make sure you space them appropriately. Corn is pollinated mostly by wind, and so they need to be spaced appropriately to help that pollination actually happen naturally. I've never actually grown corn. You can see I live in suburban USA, and my HOA I don't think would be very happy about it. But I do think it'd be kind of funny to have a bunch of corn stalks on the far side of the fence and make my HOA mad at me. So we've talked about some warm season crops that are great for Central and North Florida to plant right now. But what about you guys in South Florida? It's warming up quickly down there, and you guys are in the starting window for hot season crops. Hot season crops include your okra and your southern peas and your loofah. Loofah is a good candidate to fill those arch trellises, and southern peas can go on a teepee trellis, just like I showed with my pole beans. Okra grows super fast, and you've got to be ready to harvest, but it's a really good candidate to plant in the hot season right now for South Florida. In past spring seasons, I've always thought about delaying planting my hot season crops like okra and southern peas because I wanted to reserve them for the summer months. If this is your first season planting a garden in Florida, you may not know this, but those of us who are seasoned gardeners probably do know this, that there's very few crops that we can plant in the summer unless you really get into some unique tropicals. So one of my strategies in the past was to really go with warm season crops in the spring and reserve those hot season crops for the summer. This year I'm taking a little bit of a different approach. I think I'm going to do my hot season crops in like May and June, and then come July, I'm going to pull everything out of the garden and do a cover crop. I've never done a cover crop before, in part because I feel like I have limited garden space, and obviously I'm trying to create videos for you guys, and I feel that I'm taking my abilities away, and I'm taking away some creative opportunities if I do a cover crop. But I think it's time to really focus on adding the green manure into the garden, and I want to do a summer cover crop really badly, get my root knot nematodes under control, and devote the garden space to cover crop for a couple months before the fall planting season. So think about your strategy and what it might be, and how you might want to reserve your garden space in different seasons for different crops. Now, along that same train of thought, managing the garden space throughout the seasons, think about where you're going to plant your sweet potatoes and when you're going to plant your sweet potatoes. Starting sweet potato slips is fairly easy, but it is time consuming. I've got a video right here that goes through the different methods of starting sweet potato slips, but essentially the one that I recommend is planting it in a 10 by 20 tray full of soil. Plant the potato about halfway in, and then it'll grow sprouts, and then you can cut off those sprouts, put them in the water, it'll grow roots, then it'll be ready for transplant. That whole process takes about 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm planning on starting them really soon, probably sometime in the month of March I'll start them. And then it's up to me to figure out where I'm going to put them in the garden. In previous years, I've done that raised bed over there, and last year I did this raised bed over here, and I keep finding sweet potato pieces in this bed, and I've been warned from the beginning to think about whether or not you actually want to put your sweet potatoes in your raised bed, because it's hard to find the end of the root and make sure you got it all out. And I kind of thought that was not a big problem, because my plan was to clear out all the crops and then harvest the sweet potatoes too. Boy, was I wrong. I did that. The whole garden bed was empty. And then I harvested my sweet potatoes, and I still didn't get them all out, and I still keep seeing sprouts pop up from sweet potatoes that are somehow still growing in the bottom of the raised bed. Now we still have some last chance opportunities for root veggies. I just planted some carrots right up here. I haven't got to the point where I'm going to thin them, but I will once I start seeing some true leaves. And you can also do radishes this month, especially if you guys are in North or Central Florida. I would do a last-ditch effort to plant some root veggies, because this is your last chance to plant them until fall. And if you're anything like me, carrots are my favorite thing to eat out of the garden. And so I wanted to make sure I had a nice big crop of carrots coming up here in about 2 months. And I thought it would be unique to plant them in the garden tower. It's something I've never done before, but this is essentially a full column of soil. So theoretically, the taproots should be able to find plenty of depth and grow really well. All of Florida can also transplant celery this month. I've got it tucked back here behind this obelisk trellis of sugar snap peas, and it's progressing really nicely. I've had it in there for a few weeks, maybe 2 months. Not quite ready to harvest, but this is a great candidate for filling your freezer with celery that you can use for soups all year long. Now let's talk about some greens. When it comes to salad greens, your best bet right now is going to be arugula and spinach, because they reach their harvest time the fastest. And I would start with a transplant if possible. If not, you can start from seed. And those crops should be done in about 2 months. If you're worried about the temperatures climbing too fast and those crops bolting, I would highly recommend putting them in a spot in the garden that gets some shade. So maybe you can tuck it behind a taller plant, or tuck it on the shade side of a trellis. Something like that would really help with preventing bolting. Now, some greens are heat tolerant, and those are going to be kale and Swiss chard. Kale and Swiss chard, for me, kale has grown all through the really hot months, and so has Swiss chard. I mean, they don't always look amazing. Sometimes they're wilty, but you could also put them in kind of a partial shade area in the garden underneath a trellis or behind a bigger plant. Swiss chard, some varieties feel a little bit like slimy, when you eat them fresh. Like this one, I think this is a rainbow chard. I think I'm gonna give perpetual chard a shot and see if I like that texture better. Kale, I would highly recommend going with a lacinato kale. That one will grow and grow and grow and grow. I've had lacinato kale turn into a tree in the garden. And the only reason that the plant died is because the wind knocked it over and I didn't have it properly supported. But it wasn't dying at all. I did have some serious pest pressure with aphids when I did that though, so I would consider planting some nasturtium nearby to act as a trap crop. Nasturtium is a really good trap crop for aphids. And I've also noticed milkweed too. Whenever I plant milkweed, aphids are all over the milkweed, and theoretically they would be all over the milkweed and not all over the kale. Now let's get into some last chance cool season crops. South Florida, I'm sorry, this does not apply to you. But North and Central Florida, you can transplant something like a kohlrabi this month. Kohlrabi is one of the most heat tolerant brassicas, although that doesn't mean it likes the heat. It just means that it seems to produce, even as the temperatures are climbing, much better than something like a Brussels sprout or a heading cabbage. So if you're looking for filling some space in the garden, kohlrabi could be a good candidate this month. Although I'd definitely recommend getting some starts at the store if you don't have starts already. Starting from seed is really pushing it. North Florida, you guys run a little colder than Central and South Florida, so you can actually still plant sugar snap peas in the month of March if you really want to squeeze in a cool season crop. Just direct sow those seeds, and you don't have to thin them. You can plant them pretty densely on something like an obelisk trellis right here. Mine seem to be growing pretty slowly, although they're growing, so I can't really complain. I just did that pea and bean booster, which is like a soil inoculant that's supposed to help. I saw Homegrown Florida did a short form video about how critical that soil inoculant is for peas and beans. So I went ahead and tried it, and so far so good. I'm still not seeing any flowering or beans, but I think we're really close. This looks like we're getting really close. A tried and true easy crop for Florida gardens is a green onion. We can pretty much all transplant green onions almost year round in Florida, honestly. And you could even try a multiplier onion, which I haven't tried before, but I want to. Probably going to order some of those here soon or before the fall. But what I love about green onions is that you can just buy the organic green onions from the grocery store, cut off the green tops, plant the bottoms, and they'll regrow, and you have basically an endless supply of green onions. Now let's get into talking about herbs, because March is the prime time for almost all herbs in Florida. So we should be planting out all of our basil, cilantro, dill, parsley, oregano, mint, sage, rosemary, thyme. Did I say thyme already? Anyway, this is my tea garden, and you can see it's filling out really nicely. I'm still trying to get some to fill out in the back, but I love the way the oregano is draping over the front edge right here. It's turning out to be really pretty. And the lemon balm is coming back. I did a hard prune after that frost because we had a lot of black leaves, and it's coming back really nicely. Sage back there, I've been harvesting it quite a bit to promote new growth, and same with the thyme, and it's working out really well. I think we're going to see some explosive growth with the herbs this spring. When planting herbs in the garden, there's a few different things that I think about, and let me talk through them kind of one by one. The first is I always like to have something that's draping over the edge of a raised bed. I think it's very pretty. Oregano is a great candidate for that. And so are some flowers that I'll get into in a minute. So this is one of the top things that I consider when figuring out where to put herbs in the garden. If you're talking about lemon balm or mint, those plants can spread rapidly, and if you just put them in a raised bed, it's going to spread all over and take over the whole raised bed. But here in my tea garden, I have planted them inside a terracotta pot that I have buried, except for the top, like 1 to 2 inches of the pot, to try to contain the roots. And that way it allowed me to keep all my tea herbs together and also contain the roots of the mint so it wouldn't be so invasive and take over the raised bed. Something like a sage and a thyme are great to just put anywhere you can in the garden if you're looking to fill the space instead of having empty space in your garden. So I would squeeze those plants anywhere you can. Dill is another crop that has a lot of companion planting benefits. It has a very strong scent. If you've ever planted dill and you've ever just walked by the garden, walked by a dill plant, you can get the smell of dill really quickly. So dill is a good companion plant to put next to your cucumbers for sure. And it makes sense too because you're going to be using dill when you make pickles. Now let's talk about flowers. Flowers are so fun in the spring. It seems like when you go to any nursery or store, the flowers are just blooming everywhere. There's so many of them. But I think it's important in a garden to think about how you might use your flowers. There are vining flowers that could be a really beautiful accent on something like an arch trellis. So, for example, a butterfly pea flower would vine, so would a black-eyed Susan, and so would a morning glory. Those would be really nice to fill in between some plants on an arch trellis. You also have some mounding type flowers, or ones that will really spread out and create a lot of coverage on top of the garden or on top of your soil. In a raised bed, something like marigold would be amazing. Marigolds just grow so easily here all the way through the summer, honestly. And they drop their seeds and they'll just resow constantly and you'll just never run out of any marigolds. And it's really easy to save the seeds. They do require some deadheading if you want them to look their best. And some of you might find that annoying, but I think it's actually really therapeutic. I would equate deadheading flowers to pressure washing. It's just something that once you start, you can't stop. So marigolds are a good candidate for the raised bed. Nasturtium, I know I've mentioned it before as a trap crop. That's a good candidate too. Some of them create like a mound and some are a little bit more trailing, so they might have a little bit more of a vine, but it's not going to be quite the same distance. It's not going to be quite the same length of a vine as like a morning glory would be, or a butterfly pea flower. And then we also can do milkweed. Make sure you're careful about which milkweed you buy. I have bought I think it's called the tropical milkweed before, and put it in the garden, and then I learned that it actually is one of the worst plants for transmitting a parasite to the monarch butterflies. And so it really can impact their population in a negative way. And a lot of times when we're planting flowers like a milkweed and it's labeled as a butterfly flower, one of the benefits we're looking for is to help the butterflies. So I would recommend going for a native milkweed and not a tropical milkweed this spring. There's really just so many flowers that we can do this month that should do really well here for a while, like Crossandra, Celosia, Lobelia, Gazania, Gallardia, Gomphrena. I think I'm pronouncing all of these okay. Dusty Miller is a good candidate too. And pentas, I love growing pentas. Pentas you can usually find them in that nice, vibrant red, and I think it complements something like the natural colors in a garden so well. And they're just very widely available. You can go to almost any store, any plant store, and you'll see pentas. And then phlox. I grew my own phlox from seed, and it's flowering in the herb garden back there. And phlox is proving to be a really beautiful one as well. So I think that the only mistake you can make this month with flowers is not planting any flowers. So have some fun with it. Get some seeds if you want, or go to the store and get some transplants. Make sure you incorporate flowers in your garden. That's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.